Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hello, my name is Charles D. Smith, and I'm the host of Undiscovered Gems. Today, we have on the show a repeat participant. Why? Because he's knowledgeable. He's always giving undiscovered gems on any subject matter as it pertains to law. Today we have on the show again, welcome back, Paul D. Bekman. Paul has been practicing law for over 40 years, and he's not even thinking about retiring. And we're glad to have him on the show again. Paul, how are you?
Doing great, Charles. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Paul, this show, we want to talk a lot about casework. You've been doing it for so long. You've had so many cases. There's a couple cases in the market today. We want to hop right into it. You know, talk to us a little bit about this Disney case that's going on out there that a lot of people are starting to read about.
Yeah, it's something that I think has hit the press, and there have been all kinds of comments about it. And of course, many of us, and perhaps a lot of the people who are listening into this and watching this, have been to Disney World. It's an outstanding place down in Florida near Orlando. And when you go down there, a lot of times before you go, you make arrangements to stay in Disney World. You're going to stay at one of the places there. You're going to take advantage of all of the fabulous rides and all of the fabulous places there that you can go. And perhaps unbeknownst to many people, because when you go there and they have some documents for you to sign that you're going to be coming there and you're going to stay there, a typical document that you will sign before you go down there is a statement that you will not file a lawsuit against Disney in the event of some untoward action which may occur while you're down there. Fine print, but it's in there. So this is a story about a woman who actually was a physician, and she and her husband were heading down to Disney World for a really nice vacation, and they had signed this form with Disney Plus. So they flew down there, and the woman's name was Amy Tang. She was a physician. And she and her husband went out to dinner. And it was known by her and known by her husband that she had a food allergy for dairy and nuts. So when they went out to eat, they brought over the waiter who was going to take care of them. And on multiple occasions, not one, but on several occasions, they said, look, I am allergic to dairy and nuts. I cannot have that. Waiter says, not a problem. We will serve you a food that is allergy free. Came back again before the service took place. Are you sure that this is okay for me to eat because I am allergic to dairy and nuts? Yes, it's okay. She had the meal. Within a very short time after she ate the meal, she felt terrible. She ended up feeling so bad that they called an ambulance and was taken to a hospital, and she was dead within an hour. Unbelievable circumstance. And as happens sometimes when an untoward event like that occurs, the medical examiner in that particular state is authorized to do an autopsy. Because when you have a suspicious death like that of a woman who's healthy and she's eating something and she has a meal and then within an hour she's dead, they need to find out what is the cause of death. Sure. They did an autopsy and they found out that she had had what's called an anaphylactic reaction to nuts and dairy, and that was the cause of her death. No. Just horrendous. Now, in a legal case like this, where the thought would be of her husband would be to file a claim for negligence and failing to disclose. So here are the elements. Duty. Did they have a duty to inform her of the dairy and or the nuts that they were serving? Breached. Injury. Duty number one. So we have a breach of duty. Proximate cause. Proximate cause being, was that the cause of her death? Did she have a stroke? Did she have a heart attack? No. She had an anaphylactic caused by having that food which she was allergic to. And then the third thing is damages. And boy, did those damages take place here. The worst thing that could possibly happen. So husband seeks out a lawyer. The lawyer contacts Disney and files a lawsuit, a wrongful death lawsuit for his loving wife. And Disney comes back and says, hold it, you can't sue us. You signed this Disney Plus consumer obligation agreement, and you cannot sue us. If anything, the only thing you can do is to have an arbitration. An arbitration is where an individual designated would decide the case. So you lose your right to a jury trial, you lose your right to claim extensive damages, and you go to an arbitration. Well, the whole world woke up who knew about this and showered Disney with, what are you doing? How can you possibly do this for causing this woman's death? And then saying you can't sue them for what is done wrong, to right a wrong. And lo and behold, Disney backed off. They withdrew the arbitration and they said, you can file a lawsuit. And I will bet dollars to donuts, Charles, that case will never see the light of day in a jury. That case will be settled. But this is a warning for everybody, because we all may be in states which do not have a law that says it is illegal and improper to have a reservation of your rights by, for example, going to a fair and getting on a merry-go-round, or going on a loop-de-loop, or renting out a boat or a kayak or a jet ski, or go to a baseball game or a football game. You go to a baseball game and you're sitting on the third base line and you're looking to the right, and all of a sudden a ball hits you. People have been killed. People have had serious injuries, and the ticket has a waiver on it. So, for example, in our state, in Maryland, just recently this year, the legislature passed a law revoking the right of someone such as that to preclude you from bringing an action. You do not release your rights. But every state is different, and everyone here who may be listening may be in a state where that has not been done. So you have to be careful about what you sign. Same things hold true when you go on a cruise ship, because there are all types of waivers. There's a 1-year statute of limitation. You have to file your lawsuit in Florida, even if you live in Minnesota or California. So you've got to read what you are obligated to sign before you take a trip or engage in a recreational enjoyment.
Paul, it makes total sense on, everyone having and reserving the right to review and read what you sign. However, fine print can be 5 pages, 10 pages, 30 pages of fine print. Not to mention any names, but in the tech world, we have our phones, we have email, we have social platforms, communication platforms, and there's fine print in all of those. I'm sure I haven't read it. I'm sure I've given up some rights to for them to do certain things as citizens under the law. I know negligence of the law is no excuse. However, this fine print, I want to say there's poison pills put in all this fine print. Do we really have to get a lawyer when we're getting ready to get an email to read the 5 pages of fine print?
If not a lawyer, than a discussion with a lawyer about what the law is in that particular state that is providing you with that type of reservation of rights. Because there are a lot of states that have followed our state here in Maryland in revoking that law. You need to know whether that law is effective when you sign it. If it's something that takes place in Florida and you're in Minnesota, you're going to have to check that law. And this is a prime example, Charles, of what all of us are confronted with. And it brings to the fore the fact that these reservation of rights and consumer obligation agreements that limit our rights should be vacated. They should not exist. And so many times when a situation like this happens, as it had in Disney, where they ended up giving in, go to your legislatures. Go to the people that pass the law. Be active, be proactive, and get that part of your law, because it's only fair. People are responsible for what they do wrong. And if they do something wrong, they should be held to be accountable. So it will bring awareness, as this has brought awareness to a lot of people who now are checking with their legislators to say, do we have this in Minnesota? Do we have this in Delaware? We have this down in Louisiana and Texas. And I think there has been and continues to be a move where a state has that to get it removed. Bring it to the attention. Your specific question about a lawyer, look, if you're going on a trip and they send you something, it's our obligation to read it. And if there's a problem, then you need to address it. And yes, it may be fine print. Get that little microscope out in your hand and take a look and make sure what you're reading. It's very important. If you have a question, call the people that send it to you. But it's there. It's there, and people have to be aware of it.
Gotcha. Paul, we're going to talk about a fun fact here. You went to New York Military School with a very famous person today that is all over the airwaves, the media waves, the publicity waves, a man running for President Donald Trump. You went to school with him. Is that correct?
That is correct. This was New York Military Academy, Cornwall on the Hudson, New York. I was there with Donald, who was known as DJ, or DT, Donald Trump. And we knew each other well. We were friends. We were both athletes. He was captain of the baseball team. I was captain of the golf team. We got along very well. And as I think I may have mentioned to you, when we graduated together, there were 94 kids in our class. I was fortunate. I was a good student. I graduated first in the class. And at the end of the year, they always make a determination of different people, best athlete.
Accolades. Yeah.
Who is the person that is the funniest? Who was most likely to succeed? And fortunately, I was voted most likely to succeed. But there was another award that you could have, and that was Ladies' Man. And the winner of that award was Donald J. Trump.
Really? He got an award.
This was 1964.
Wow. Well, today we know he got it, honestly. And that's a very interesting fun fact that you went to school with him. I found that pretty amazing. I've dealt with him in Bridgeport, Connecticut, when he was coming to talk about building an amusement park in Pleasure Beach. I've dealt with him when Dennis Rodman was on his show, the entrepreneurial show he had, and they said, "You're fired." I forgot the name of the show, but I have my interactions with former President Trump. So Very interesting fun fact, and I thought our audience would enjoy that. So thank you for sharing. We want to get back into the casework here. Now, I know preparing for a case, and we want to talk about some cases that you have to go through a process of really just gathering evidence. You need to analyze your evidence. You need to interview your witnesses. You go through a process of preparing your arguments, and you research your laws. So you go through this whole process to be able to be prepared to go in. So with the confines of doing that, talk about some of the cases you've had. You've gone through preparation, and let's hear about the outcomes, some of the tough cases that you've had and some of your outcomes.
Well, I'll give you some recent examples
Nice.
that may be of some help. People may remember there was a terrible tragedy that took place down in Charlottesville, Virginia, involving the men's and women's lacrosse team. And both of those teams, by the way, at the UVA, University of Virginia, were in the top 5, both the women's and men's lacrosse. There was a young woman. Her name was Yardley Love, who was a beautiful, hardworking, wonderful person who was from Maryland, but had gotten a scholarship to attend UVA. And she was on the women's lacrosse team. After her sophomore year, she dated a fellow by the name of George Ugley, who was on the men's lacrosse team. And they started to go out, and they went out a lot, and they were very close. But it was the kind of a relationship, unfortunately, that deteriorated because George had a terrible problem with alcohol. And they ended up breaking up. And they were both at this point seniors at UVA in the spring, right before graduation. And it turned out that Yardley and he had broken up. He had been continuing to drink. He had been continuing to get intoxicated. And he had seen her earlier at a bar, and he really didn't want to have anything to do with him. And she went back to her room in the dormitory. And in that room, there were 3 bedrooms. She went into her room. She locked her room. And very early in the morning, there's a knock on her door. This is after midnight. And who is it? Yardley, it's me, it's George. She says, George, I do not want you to come in here. I do not want to have anything to do with you. You've got to go away. Pounding on the door. Doesn't go away. Knocks the door in. Onto the floor. And then between the two of them, and it's not exactly clear what happened, other than Yardley is found on the bed, face down. There's blood in the bed. There's blood on the floor. And Yardley Love is dead. Horrendous situation. And George Ugley is arrested. He's taken into custody, and he's kept into custody, and says he has no real recollection of what happened. Trying to set up a defense of, I was so intoxicated that I couldn't have had the intent to hurt the person that I loved. Well, as it turned out, he was tried in a criminal court in Virginia. He did not testify at the trial, but the medical examiner testified at the trial, who had conducted the autopsy, and found that she had been beaten to death. And she and George Ugly didn't plead guilty, but was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sent to jail for 23 years. He tried to get out of it by filing what's called a writ of habeas corpus, saying he was convicted without proof. And he went through 6 different writs of habeas corpus in the state court and then in the federal court, all of which were denied. And that's where it stood in the summer, where I could not take his deposition because we had filed a lawsuit against him because he would have taken the Fifth Amendment. But once the writs were all completed, which they were, I could do so. So I filed a notice with the court to have him removed from prison, come to the courthouse, which he did with guards, and I ended up taking his deposition, which is this question and answer period, live, videotaped. And he basically ended up giving me exactly what I needed in order to establish that it was him who had done it, what he had done that day, what he had drank that day, where he had gone to dinner with his parents that night, and what had happened when he went over there. And when we ended up going to court, and this case went to trial in a civil trial, one of the exhibits, besides the photographs and the very just heartbreaking photographs of Yardley and autopsy photographs, was the door. I had the door brought to the courtroom for them to see, the jury. Jury went out for only about 2 hours, and they came back with a verdict. Now, in this particular case, the people that were the people bringing the case were Yardley's mother, Sharon, and her sister, Lexi. Lexi was 2 years older than she was. And the jury awarded $7,500,000 for each of them. So a total of $7.5 million for each of them, or a total of $15 million. No appeal was taken. And George Ugly is still in jail. So many people would say, well, why would you do this? Why would you bring this case when he was convicted and he's in jail? Well, there are 2 parts to the law here. And one of them was, you have the right to bring a civil case. And I told the family when they contacted me, and there was no insurance that was available for him, because when you commit a crime, even if you have a homeowner's policy, it has what's called a criminal acts exception. So there was no coverage. But what I said to the family is, this is a wrong that needs to be righted. This is an example of why you should go to a court, get a judgment, which will end up being with him for the rest of his life, because it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy, because this was an intentional act and the jury found that. So this will be with him for the rest of his life as a unbelievably brutal, vicious attack on a lovely, wonderful girl with a fantastic future. And as a result of what happened in this event, her mother, Sharon Love, established a foundation called the One Love Foundation. And what the One Love Foundation does, and it's all over the country, is to try to give students, college students, information about relationships which you have to be aware of, where people are drinking, where people are using drugs, where people are acting out, and what you should do and how you should go about getting away from that situation. And it's a wonderful, wonderful organization that will be around for a very long time.
Wow. It's a great story, great case. In your preparation, when you're preparing arguments and you're interviewing your witnesses, you interview witnesses on both sides in this case?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yep. So,
yeah.
Depositions were taken of Sharon Love and Lexi Love and her husband. And I took depositions of George Ugly and his mother and aunt and all of those people who had any knowledge of it at all. The police, the medical examiner, all of the above.
Wow. That was a tough case. Just sidebar here, Paul. Do you ever get emotionally attached to your cases? I know, like from an athlete standpoint, you go out there, you play, it's a job, you go in and you leave it on the court and you go home to your family. Do you ever bring it home?
You unfortunately have to bring it home. Because if somebody has a horrendous event, it's something that has got to get you right here. And for me, when that happens, it boils down to making sure that the family feels that they're in the best of hands, that somebody is going to lead you down this path, which will be emotional. And it's something that you should not hide your emotion. It's something that a jury will know if you are hiding or know if you are faking. And when it's real, Charles, as you know, it is real.
Right.
And it is a part of a case. Mental anguish, emotional pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life. Yes, it has to get to you, because if it doesn't get to me, then it's my time to stop.
Yeah, spoken like a true vet. Spoken like a true vet. My teammates need to know that we're emotionally tied and connected when we go into games. So no, I understand that. Thanks for sharing that. There's definitely a synergy there with you having to bring it home. Yeah, we just have to bring it together in the court. So
well, one thing, Charles, and I think the audience might want to know this, when you talk about emotional feelings, when Charles Smith had to play basketball against Michael Jordan, he probably had some emotion in him during that time on the basketball court. Did he not?
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. And that can go into a whole nother subject when we talk about emotions and decision making and work and all those sorts of things. But Paul, again, every time we speak, it seems like time flies, and we're coming to a close here. And I want to give you an opportunity to talk to the audience about, your casework and what's happening in the market. Just leave us with a little undiscovered gem on your casework.
Well, you never know what happens when the phone rings, Charles, what it is, what it'll bring. And, one of the things that to me is extremely important is that the client feels comfortable and knows where they're going to be taken, and that they are in good hands, and that I will lead them, whether it comes to a trial or whether it comes to a resolution. And I think that it's the duty and responsibility of the lawyer to engage with the client one of the biggest complaints is that lawyers don't return phone calls. Well, absolutely, it's an absolute essential that you do that. And keep in contact with the client so that the client knows that you're there with them and you will lead them. And at the end of the day, things will all work out well. So 2 things, preparation and perseverance wins the day.
Paul Bekman, thank you for sharing your knowledge, your energy, and these other undiscovered gems that we're always looking forward to when speaking with you. And you delivered them again today. So thank you for coming on the show. Always great to see you, interview you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Charles. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.